But in the meantime, we got 2024, and it starts in Dublin, Ireland with Georgia Tech. And we got Labor Day against Boston College. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, I know it looks like an easy game, but I'm not going to be underestimating Labor Day games again. I did that last year with Clemson Duke. I'm not doing that again. But what's your take on 2024, the schedule?
Yeah, I think the schedule sets up really well for the Knowles. I mean, I think that you do have to go across the pond and play in Dublin, but I mean, so does Georgia Tech, right? Like, I don't think they're set up better to do that anymore than you are. So any negatives there, like if you I mean, if you can't get up and play in Dublin, I mean, I don't know that you were going to get up and play in Tallahassee. So who cares? They should handle Georgia Tech. They should handle Boston College. A lot of the other schedule, early. I mean, they should beat Memphis. Florida State needs to get back to, and I think they have for the most part, right? We'll see if they start 5-0 or not, but for the most part, I think they have gotten back to like, well, when they're a bigger and better and faster and more well coached and just team that should go out and win, you got to get back to just beating those teams. And for a while, Florida State was struggling with the Boston Colleges and the Dukes and the Syracuses and Pitt and these teams that, yeah, they're fine programs, right? Like, I'm not trying to like talk massive crap about them, but like Florida State should never lose a game to Syracuse, right? Florida State should very rarely ever lose a game to BC or some of these other teams in the ACC. Now, you play NC State and Raleigh, that's a tough game. You play Miami, that's a rival, that's a tough game. Clemson's a tough game. Virginia Tech at times can be tough. But there's a lot of teams in this conference that Florida State just shouldn't lose to, right? Florida State thinks of itself as a top 10 program all time. The numbers probably represent that. They think of themselves as a top 10 program this year upcoming. Certainly thought they were a top 10 program last year. And top 10 programs don't lose to the bottom feeders in their conference, right? Ohio State may not look good, but they're not losing to Illinois. They're not losing to Rutgers. Alabama's not losing to Vandy. They're not losing to Mississippi State. They're not losing some of these games. So now, every great once in a while, could one of those teams knock you off? Absolutely, right? You think about Mississippi State when they had Dak or this, could one of those teams upset? Sure. But that, what is that? 1 out of every 30 years, and that's kind of where Florida State needs to get back to. And when you look at those first 5 games on the schedule, you'd say, man, they recruit better than all those teams. None of those places are incredibly intimidating places to play. You play at Doak for 3 of them. You're neutral for the other one. So you should win all of those games, right? Your first 5, you should beat. You're a double-digit favorite against Georgia Tech. You're a 20-plus point favorite against Boston College. There is no world where Memphis should be on the same field as you for 4 quarters in Tallahassee. You should never lose a game to Cal in many things, but certainly not football when they've had to travel to the East Coast. And then you play did I mix those up? You have SMU, Cal, and SMU.
That looks like trap game material to me, because like you guys are going to be sitting there thinking about Clemson for a little bit, but they're going to try to catch you napping.
Maybe. I've not seen Florida State. Like, the one thing I will say that Norvell has done really well is they've really not lost a lot of those trap games like that. Like, really in anything, or like, really, like even in the bad years, like they were just losing games because they were worse than teams. Like, it wasn't like, oh, they looked ahead to another week, or they were just bad back then. And so I don't know. I think they do a good job of getting up for those teams. Now, do they sometimes have a sleepy first quarter or a sleepy first half? Absolutely. And if you do that, you can let a team stick around. But Norvell does a pretty good job of keeping them focused. And I think SMU is the best of that bunch of 5. And I think that's going to help, right? Because you're going on the road to Dallas. I think SMU could be 3-1 or 4-0 at that point. And if they are, that's going to be kind of a highly ranked game. I think SMU will be top 25. Florida State will be 4-0 and top 10, 5, maybe even. And so I think that'll be a game that's getting a lot of attention. And I actually don't worry about that being a trap game, because if it was a noon kickoff in Tallahassee the week before Clemson, maybe if it was against, one of these other teams, but I think SMU is going to have your full attention. I think they'll play fairly well in that one. And I think they start the year 5-0.
That is pretty good. And, I'm looking at the conference schedule ending with North Carolina. It's funny, though. It's ending on the first Saturday of November, but you got yourself a tough November because, of course, you got North Carolina coming to your backyard. Although Florida State, I don't think has a tough time with North Carolina. North Carolina has a tough time with them. But you got to go to Notre Dame on NBC, and you got Florida on rivalry week. So that looks pretty huge.
Yeah, I think November is, you wonder like how healthy are you by the time you get there, right? Florida State would have never guessed that last November they'd have lost QB1, right? And so how healthy are you when you get to November? How healthy are your opponents? Florida State, Jordan Travis got hurt, and unfortunately, maybe fortunately for the Noles, but unfortunately for the kid, Graham Mertz got hurt 15 minutes later, and so then you knew you were going to have two backups in that game. And so that was pretty crazy for both those to happen really just minutes apart. But yeah, I think November is like, how healthy are you? Can you get there really, really healthy? And then can you split those games, right? You don't have to be perfect. You'd love to be perfect this year, but can you split those games? You start out 5-0 and you do what you need to do to start the year. And then in October, we didn't talk about October, but the only two real tests in October are Miami and Clemson. Well, can you split those? Can you split? Yeah. Can you split the two in October, and can you split the two in November and go 10-2? If you go 10-2 and you're in the ACC championship, I think you're going to the playoff, right? You need to win the ACC, but and even if you don't, if you go 10-2 and miss Charlotte, I think you've got a chance. But yeah, I mean, and you should beat Florida. Notre Dame's gonna be tough on the road in November. It's gonna be freezing. You should beat Florida. This Florida team should not beat you.
Yeah, October 5th, we're going to be finding out a lot about who's really running the ACC. I mean, I'm thinking right now it's Florida State, but because, we've seen Clemson in the past 3 years, they've just been falling apart. They've been a disaster.